Hi everybody, this is John back with another model inbox review. It's blatantly obvious that what we're talking about today is the Frog Supermarine Spitfire Mark 8 or 9 in 1/72nd scale. Quite an old kit, an interesting kit with a little bit of history which makes collectors, they probably know the information that I'm about to give, but there were two variants of this kit, 233 and 237, but we'll get into that in a minute. Before I go into the actual boxing history of this kit, I just want to explain some different Mark 9 based variants which I've included in the options and costs, because basically there are quite a lot of options and costs, but I want to explain to you what the difference between the variants listed in the options and costs. First of all, the Mark 8. Now the Mark 8 Spitfire is instantly recognisable by its retractable tail wheel, but it did actually have a couple of other minor modifications. It had a slightly different engine variant of the Merlin than the Mark 9, and in many cases pilots preferred to fly the Mark 8 because they said that it was just a better flying experience. The aircraft also tended to have a raised tail fin, because Mark 8s were used in the FR and LF marks as well as HR marks, and the HR and HF marks tended to have the taller rudder, which gave them more response at higher altitudes. So that's the Mark 8. The Mark 9, you can't really see it very well, but the tail wheel on all Mark 9s are fixed, they're not retractable. Again, early development Mark 9s actually had Mark 5 airframes and what's called an E-wing fitted to them. An interesting thing about the Mark 9 a lot of people don't realise is that the aircraft was fitted with, yes, it had 420mm cannons, but it also replaced the 303-inch machine guns with .50 caliber Colt Browning machine guns, which gave the Mark 9 a real serious amount of more punch to its armament. Mark 9s came with a taller rudder, some had clipped wings, and they came in HF, FR, F Mark 9s and LF Mark 9 variants, and they also came in Mark Cs and Es as well. And the only real difference between a Mark C and a Mark E is avionics, for the mission that they were intended to do. The Mark 9 also had a trainer variant. This is called the TR Mark 9. There's a future release from Airfix in 48 scale of the TR Mark 9, and this is what the aircraft will be modelling from. The TR Mark 9 is exactly the same as a Mark 9 Spitfire. It did have a raised rudder, fixed undercarriage in the tail wheel, but it had a separate canopy here for the I can't remember whether that's the instructor's position or that's the instructor's position. I've got a feeling the instructor went in the rear bubble, but yeah, that's the TR Mark 9 variant. Then you have the Mark 16s, and the Mark 16s are an interesting commodity because they utilised a licence-built Rolls-Royce Merlin built by Packard in America. They also had various avionic fits which tended to be slightly different, and they came in HF, F, FR and LF Mark C's and E's, and also B variants of the Spitfire, which had floats, but they were quite a rare commodity, and the idea was dropped quite quickly. Again, some were fitted with taller tail fins, and some were fitted with clipped wings. But that's the Mark 16, and they also produced an LF Mark 16 and an F Mark 16, which came usually in this guise with the bubble canopy and the cut down rear fuselage. And for low level and mid height operations, these came into their own because they offered the pilot incredibly good rear and sideward visibility for low level missions. So that's the LF Mark 16 as well. Again, with a fixed tail wheel, everything the same as a Mark 9 in many respects, except that engine. That engine is a license-built, Packard-built Merlin. So anyway, which kit are we building? Well, we said we were building the Frog kit, which is actually this baby. Now, the Frog Spitfire originally was released in 1974 and its serial number was F233, but it wasn't the only version of this kit that you could buy. And we'll go into that with the next slide. The kit was actually quite accurate in terms of overall shape. It certainly was on a par with the Matchbox Spitfire Mark 9, maybe not in as much as overall accuracy of shape, but the actual kit itself was a reasonable rendition of a Mark 9 Spitfire. But of course you could build the Mark 8 because it had separate parts in the Mark 8, which I'll show you when we get to the sprues in a minute. It also had a nice display stand, which was completely movable, and you could even mount it on the wall. You can see there's a little hole here for the stand where you can put a screw through a grommet into the wall and then mount the aircraft off the wall, either in a diving or climbing configuration, or you can just have it desktop, which was quite nice. And a lot of these models, I don't know why it is, but they came with two canopies. Both the canopies are identical. It's not a matter of the Mark 8 and the Mark 9 canopy. It wasn't like that. Some of these kits just had two canopies in them, and I don't understand why. The decals in Frog kits tend to be quite good. They tend to wear quite well over the years. And also Frog having all their sprues inside frames means that most of the time you'll find that the pieces tend to still be on sprue when you open the packet, even though the kit's 30 or 40 years old. That's F233 1974 release, but they also released this kit in F237, and the only major difference in the two kits is the colour of the sprue. The sprue was a light grey, and I think they just wanted to get a feel of the market. Would people prefer a light grey or a dark grey? And to be honest with you, the results were pretty nondescript, and so they just dropped the F237 variant of the kit in favour of the F233. Rovex, under the guise of Remus play kits, also released the Mark 8 and 9, which was the Frog kit, in 1975, and these tended to be what are called bag models. They included cement and they were aimed at ages above 8 years old. The artwork on the Remus play kits I always thought was quite good. They tended to be they differed from the Frog counterparts of the same kit. Anyway, that's 1975. Then we go into 1976, and this is the variant of the kit that I've got. This is the boxing I've got to review. Again, it's exactly the same as the 74 release, and the plastic inside this kit is dark grey. So this is F233. Then Remus play kits again came out with the Remus release in 1976, but this time just the Spitfire Mark 9. You could actually still build a Mark 8 out of this kit because the sprues are identical as what were in there before, but I think there were only decals for one variant, which was a Mark 9 seen in front of you. 1976 went through to 1982, and a company called Camonet, under the marketing direction of MIR, they released this kit in a rather crude boxing with a very unrealistic Spitfire image on the front. They released this kit several times in the 80s, I believe in 86 and 89, in the same box, exactly the same, but they changed the sprue colour to this sort of, it's almost like a zinc chromate colour, isn't it? Which is quite interesting, but the kit's exactly the same as the Frog model in every way, shape or form. So that's Mir 1982. There's another company in 1989. I believe this company was under the guise of Coronet or Cominet, or whatever they're called. Company called Toy Plastics Team. And again, it's a direct copy of the MIR kit that was released earlier in the 80s. 1989 went through to 1992, and Model Hobby got on the scene. Again, light grey plastic. I think it had different colour schemes, but it was of the Mark 8 and 9 with different decals on there, so that's interesting as well. 1992 Model Hobby. Then in 1994, VES came on the scene with the first Floatfire release from this particular kit. Again, the sprues you can see on the right are a different colour. They're like a buffy cream colour and a sort of a midnight blue sprue for the floats and the rudders, which the rudder itself is completely different on the Floatfire. But that's a Mark 9 Floatfire, often called a Mark 9B variant of the Spitfire. 1995, a company called Kopnak, they released a frog kit straight Mark 9. I don't think it came with decals for a Mark 8. And the decals were EBZ, which I think was what they call rhubarb and cap fighter aircraft to cover combat operations over northern France. 1995 from Kopnak there. Then we go through to 1998 with Mia again, this time the same box art, but it's in red with blue sort of under features. Interesting. 1998 there. We go through now to 2003. This is a company called Stream, and they built the Mark 9B Floatfire. Again, this is based on the frog kit, but it only has parts in it to build the Mark 9B. Interesting. They also released in 2003 the Spitfire Mark 9. Again, this is not a Mark 8. I think it only had decals in it for a Mark 9, but the part were there. Those two parts were still there to build the Mark 8 if you so wanted to. Anyway, that was 2003, and we'll leave you a nice image now of a Mark 8 Spitfire. I think this is actually pretty much the variant of the Mark 8 that is depicted by the frog kit, which is interesting, and it has white leading edges to the wings. Quite like the idea of that. Anyway, that's the Mark 8 Spitfire. We'll just bring you down now to our little kit we have here, and it is quite a nice little kit. There we go. There's my hand. It's about the size of my hand, the box. It's a flip top lid. Interesting. On the sides of the box, or on the back of the box, you've got collector's tips, maker's tips. Every bit of this is in English except for the right hand side stuff, which is in 4 different languages, I believe. Yeah. Oh no, you've got English, French, I think that's Spanish. I don't know what that is. It might be German, Dutch. Different language on the side anyway there. That's quite nice. You've got an image of one of the frog kits they released, which was a 0, and on the other side you've got the 109F, the P51A Mustang, the Tomahawk P40B, which is quite nice, and the TA152H high altitude fighter. On the back you've got the colour codes, the call outs and decal position applications, which is quite nice. You've even got the shark's teeth insignia on the decals, which is again quite nice. I quite like that. So yeah, the 2 variants, I'll explain what those variants are. The decals are 4 different versions and what they're for. So what we'll do first of all, what we usually do, we'll have a look at the instruction leaflet. And then we'll have a look at the decals, and then we'll go through the parts. The instruction leaflet is quite a nice, daintily folded up instruction leaflet, which, yeah, it's not really a standard imperial size, is it? You've got some information there on special instructions for this particular kit. It basically explains the difference in the parts between the Mark 9 and the Mark 8. And the method of construction is quite straightforward, and there doesn't seem to be any issues whatsoever. And on the back you've got some hints and tips. This was common of Frog. Actually it was common of a lot of companies. Matchbox did quite a bit of this in the 70s, which was quite nice. Anyway, method of construction. I'm not going to go bananas through this, but basically you've got pilot and seat in section 1, section 2 is propeller assembly, then you've got the main undercarriage oleos and wheels, section 4 is the wing assembly, where you decide whether to put your aircraft in wings up, undercarriage up or down, and you've got a slipper tank under there. That's a fuel tank to extend the Spitfire's range, especially at low level. And then section 5, you've got the fuselage, where you have the options of 2 rudders. And then section 6, you marry all the airframe together, a couple of items of fittings, and an option for section 6 is the difference in the parts for the Mark 8 and Mark 9. The Mark 8 has part 29 and 14, or 28 in the closed position, and the Mark 9 has a separate part, I think it might be 28 in the closed position, and just using Mark 14 into 28 for the closed position, but you bore a hole out. We'll have a look at that in a minute when we get to the parts, because I'm not sure, there might be a separate part for the Mark 9 to build the Mark 9. And then, oh yes, there it is, there's a separate part for the Mark 9, 27 and 14. So you've got 2 closed door positions and 1 open for the tail wheel, and then you've got the pitot tube and cannon fit. Now the cannon fit is actually part of the wings. I do remember seeing that on the parts. So, you know, it's quite easy. There's no difficulty in understanding the instructions there whatsoever. The decals, I'm going to take this backing film off because I want to show you how good these decals are. Now, I've built the 5B Spitfire from Airfix, and it's Series 2, and it was released in about the same year as this kit. And this kit, in my opinion, had better decals because you had the runner lines, tether point markings. There's a couple of markings there, I'm not sure where they go, but they become apparent. And then you had 2 options. The Mark 9 is the RAF roundels, and the Mark 8 is the the Royal Australian Air Force markings with the shark teeth and cinia. And that's probably the variant I'm going to build, because I quite fancy having shark's teeth on the front of a Spitfire. I quite like the look of that. The decals are very good quality. They're actually not that raised. There's no cracks or issues with the decals whatsoever, and they look like they're going to go down quite nicely. Frog decals do have an issue with the backing film. They do sometimes tend to be a bit opaque, but usually with some gloss varnish down before you apply the decals, you know, that it's not usually a problem. So the sprues, let's put the sprues down here and we'll have a look at them in a minute. Put that there because we'll have a look at that in a minute as well. There's 3 loose parts in this kit: the fuselage and the propeller, but they're not damaged. I'll look at that in a minute. But before we look at any of that, cockpit canopy. Now, Frog were never renowned for producing fantastic canopies, and to be honest with you, this particular canopy to me looks like it's a slightly incorrect shape. There's just something about it, it just doesn't quite look correct. Too short, I think it might be. But we'll see what it looks like on the kit. It's quite clear. The framing on the canopy is quite defined. It'll paint up all right, but I'm just not quite 100% sure that that part is accurate. The propeller is accurate. That is a really nice rendition of a Mark 9 Spitfire propeller. Yeah, I like the look of that. There's no, whoops, there's no flash on that either, which is nice. I've dropped that on the carpet monsters looking for it. Oh, there it is, I've got it. There it is down there. So yeah, that part looks like it's going to be quite nice. It'll clean up quite nice. Little couple of bits of flash and tabs on the side. Don't need to look at both these 2 fuselage halves, but we'll have a look at one of them. Interior detail. Well, yeah, I've got an instrument panel there, even if it's in 2 halves. Interesting, but there's no other interior detail. The exhaust nozzles, they're built into the fuselage, which I've never really been a fan of. Raised panel lines, as you'd expect in a 70s kit. they're quite defined actually. They'll probably need sanding down a little bit. Yeah, interesting. But it's not a bad accurate fuselage shaft, so I'm quite looking forward to putting this kit together actually. The this sprue here, which would have had one of the fuselage halves in place on the spinner, propeller spinner. All that's left on here are the two wheels, and they're quite nicely cast as well. Not bad for 1976, is it? Nothing on the back, but then, you know, that'll be alright, I'm sure. And you've got another devoid sprue here, which would have had another fuselage half in it. This has basically got the main undercarriage oleos. They look alright. Closed main undercarriage doors with wheels in place, which from the outside look like that. Not much to write home about. And then your undercarriage doors, which again, not much to write home about. That's that slipper tank I was talking about. Not a lot on that. There's no details, surface rivets or nothing. And then you've got the sprue with the underside of the wing and the tail planes and rudders fitted. The underside of the wing is actually quite nicely cast. It is raised detail, but it's quite nice. A little bit raised. It might need sanding down a little bit, but it's quite nice. It's not that bad, is it? The two radiators are actually built into the part, which I'm not a fan of because I like to paint the insides, but fortunately you can do that before you put the wings together. So quality of the plastic on this kit is run-of-the-mill 1970s Frog. They were always built out of this really sort of hard plastic propeller retainer and the pitot tube there. Then you've got the spinner retainer that goes through that little washer, and then you've got the two tail planes with the elevators in place. In the Mark 8 and 9, the elevators and rudder were all metal skinned. And there's your two different rudders for the Mark 9 and the Mark 8 and the tail wheel. Again, not much to write home about there. They're not that fantastic. And then we've got this guy who flies the aircraft, and I'll be honest with you, he looks a bit like an orangutan, doesn't he? And he's got short stumpy legs which have been cut short. Pilot seat there, yeah, it's just a pilot seat slab, something to sit the pilot on. You've got two, I think they're radiator backs, and you've also got three parts there which, I'm trying to remember what they are. Oh yes, these are the three parts which denote the difference between the Mark 8 undercarriage doors for the tail wheel. You've got one there which has a hole in it in closed position, one which doesn't have a hole in it in closed position. Obviously this one here is the Mark 8 and that one's the Mark 9, and this is the open position for the undercarriage doors, which the tail wheel will fit into when the undercarriage is down. And then you've got the wings. The upper surfaces of the wings, they're quite nice as well, quite clearly defined again. The cannons, yeah, they're not bad. And the raised panel lines, they might need sanding down a little bit. So that's the parts, instructions, decals. Yeah, not terrible, not fantastic, but not terrible. I've seen worse. So anyway, what we're going to do now is I'm going to go through the Gumph very quickly and then close this video down. The inbox review is on the Frog Supermarine Spitfire Mark 8 or Mark 9. Its serial number is F233, but they also released an F237, which was the light grey plastic variant in the same year. The release date was 1974, but the kit I have is a 76 release, and the model was released in 1/72 scale. Now there are decals for two versions. The Mark 8 is a 457 squadron, Royal Australian Air Force at Morotai Island, flown by squadron leader Bruce Watson, Southwestern Pacific in 1945. And the second variant is a Mark 9C of 72 Squadron Royal Air Force, flown by Flight Lieutenant Prince Emmanuel Galitzine in southern France in August 1944. There are 31 parts on 4 dark grey plastic sprues and 1 transparent part on a clear plastic sprue, making 32 parts in total. The dimensions of the kit are 5 inches long by 6 inches in span, and it should sit about 1.5 inches high on its undercarriage. Now then, the options and costs, as you can gather, they're going to be quite a lot. So I've split them into standalone kits and then reboxed kits. And there are quite a few standalone kits, but they're interesting. AZ Model do a Spitfire Mark 8, a Spitfire Mark 9, a Mark 9C and a Mark 9E. And they also do a Spitfire Mark 9 bubble canopy with a cut down fuselage. And these kits all are in separate boxings, retailing for between £15 and £20. AZ Model also do a TR Mark 9 and a Mark 9 UTI Spitfire in separate boxings for £22 to £28. The original Airfix Spitfire Mark 9, this was the bag kit, JEJ, Johnny Johnson's Flight, original Series 1 kit. These can be bought, I have seen them go for as little as £3, but they're usually between £10 and £25 depending on the quality, condition of the kit and how greedy the seller is. Airfix also released this kit in a Spitfire and BF 110 dogfight double set. These kits go for about £21 to £32, and then Airfix released a new tool, Mark 9C, which can be bought for anything between £15 and £20. That Spitfire Mark 9C is one of the best Spitfire Mark 9s on the market. It's really, really nice. They also did a historic collection flight, which I believe contained a Spitfire Mark 9 early tool, a North American P-51 Mustang Series 2 tool from the 70s, and another aircraft. Was it a Hurricane or was it a Messerschmitt? I can't remember. But it was a historic collection set, and that retails between £40 and £50. Airfix also produced a Spitfire Mark 9 VE Day set, which again incorporated the early Mark 9 Spitfire, Johnny Johnson's bag kit, and that retailed for £45 to £90. They can be quite collectible. Now, Checkmaster Resin, they did a number of kits, Mark 9 and F Mark 9 and F Mark 9C, an F Mark 9E and an LF Mark 9E for about £30 to £45. They also did an Mark 8, an F Mark 8, an HF Mark 8 and an LF Mark 8 for £30 to £45. And they also did a TR Mark 9 for £30 to £45. But Checkmaster Resins also produced a Mark 16E, which goes for about £35 to £40. Edard had a go at a number of Spitfires. They did a Mark 8 and an HF Mark 8 for 12 to 25 quid. Edard also did a Mark 9, a Mark 9C and an F Mark 9 for £14 to £25. And they also had a go at a Mark 16, a Mark 16 bubble top with cut down fuselage, and these were separate boxings available for between £15 and £20. Forces of Valour did a Mark 9 for about £9 to £12. The Frog Spitfire Mark 8 and 9 is usually retails for between £8 and £15. Hasegawa did a rather nice Spitfire Mark 8 for about £15 to £20, and Hasegawa also produced a Mark 9 and Mark 9C for £14 to £22. Heller did a Mark 16E for about £8 to £20, and a Teleri produced a Spitfire Mark 9 for about £5 to £15. KP Models also had a number of Spitfire Mark 8 and 9s. The Mark 8 variant was £12 to £26. The Mark 9C, Mark 9E, F Mark 9C and LF Mark 9E were between £9 and £26, and they did a Mark 16 which retailed for between £15 and £20. Lockneer also did a Mark 9 and a separate boxing of a Mark 9 UTI for £12 to £16, and the Matchbox Mark 9 was released in 2 boxings, PK2 which was about £9 to £25 and PK52 I think. That was the latter stage which incorporated the ability to have a cut down rear fuselage and bubble canopy for the Mark 16 as well, which retails between 10 and 25 quid. Sword also produced an F Mark 9E for £11 to £20, as was the Spitfire LF Mark 16E, £11 to £20, and Sword also produced an LF Mark 9E bubble canopy with a cut down rear fuselage for £11 to £20. Ventura did a couple of kits. The Mark 8 was £12 to £17 and the Mark 9C was £12 to £17 as well. The kits worthy of note are the Airfix Mark 9C retool kit. Also, don't be put off by the Matchbox Mark 9, it's not bad. The Hasegawa Mark 9 and Mark 8s are really nice kits as well, and so were the Sword models, they weren't too bad either. Reboxed offerings, there are quite a few of these as well. Aero Team did a Spitfire Mark 8, which was a reboxed KP models kit for £10 to £15. Aero Team also did a Mark 9, which is a reboxed KP model kit, £10 to £15. Airfix by Craftmaster did a Spitfire Mark 9, that's the early tool, Series 1 model, £16 to £20. Airfix Lodella did the Dogfight double set with the Spitfire Mark 9 bag kit and the BF 110. Early tooling, I haven't seen any pricings for that, but it'll probably be about 25 quid. Bilek also did a Spitfire Mark 9 and a Mark 9C reboxed Italeri kit, £15 to £20. Bilek also produced a Spitfire Mark 9E, which was a reboxed Italeri kit, £15 to £20. Brengun produced a Floatfire Mark 9B, which is a reboxed AZ model with special parts, for £9 to £18. Farmtex did a Mark 9 and a Mark 9 UTI in separate boxings, no pricings available for those. Hella Humbrol produced a Spitfire Mark 16E, which was a reboxed Hella kit, £15 to £20. Intech Mod produced a Spitfire F Mark 9E and an LF Mark 9E reboxed KP model kits, no prices available on those. Jay's Model Kits produced a Spitfire Mark 8 and a Mark 9, they're both reboxed Ventura kits for £19 to £20. Kitpro did a Spitfire Mark 8, which is a reboxed Frog kit, no prices available on that. CoPro also produced a Mark 8 and a Mark 8C reboxed KP kits for £5 to £12. They did a F Mark 9C reboxed KP kit for £5 to £12. They also did an LF Mark 16E, which is a KP kit reboxed for £5 to £12. And CoPro also produced a Mark 9, which is a reboxed AZ model kit for £5 to £12. CoPro Air Molds also produced models of the Spitfire Mark 9B Floatfire, the Mark 9E, which are reboxed KP models for £10 to £25. CoPro Air Molds also produced a Spitfire Mark 9B Floatfire, which was a reboxed KP models kit for £10 to £25. I think I might have said that before. CoPro's Mr. Craft produced a Spitfire Mark 8C. This is a reboxed KP models kit for £10 to £12. CoPro Mr. Craft produced a Spitfire Mark 9C, LF Mark 9E, which are reboxed KP model kits for £10 to £12. And Corpac produced a Spitfire Mark 8 or 9, which is a straight rebox of the Frog kit for £10 to £15. Kova Savodi Prostojove, or KP models as they were later named, they did a Mark 9, a Mark 9E, an FR Mark 9C, an LF Mark 9E, which are reboxed AZ model kits for £12 to £15. Kova Savodi Prostojove also produced a Spitfire Mark 9C, which is a reboxed sword kit for £12 to £15. MBC Models did a Spitfire LF Mark 9, reboxed KP model, no price available on that. And MPC reboxed the Airfix Spitfire Mark 9, the Mark 1 Johnny Johnson kit, for £10 to £22. Mr. Craft also reboxed the Mark 9C KP models reboxed kit for £10 to £22. And also Model Hobby did a Spitfire Mark 8 or 9, which is a reboxed Frog kit, no prices available for that. Platts did a Spitfire Mark 9, a Mark 9C, which is a reboxed Edward kit, no prices available on that. They also did a Mark 16 bubble top with a cut down rear fuselage, which is a reboxed Edward kit, no prices available on that. Remus Play Kits did the Spitfire Mark 8 and 9 reboxed Frog kit for £13 to £15. Revell also produced a Spitfire Mark 9 and 16, which is a reboxed Frog kit, Matchbox kit, no prices available on that. Streams did the Spitfire Mark 9 and Mark 9B Floatfire, Reeboks Frog kits, no prices available on that. Toys Plastic Team Spitfire Mark 8 or 9 Tactical Fighter Aircraft, which is a Reeboks Frog kit, no prices available on that. Sukuda Hobby did a Spitfire Mark 16E Reeboks Hella kit, no prices available on that. Waterson Spitfire Mark 9, which is a Reeboks Forces of Valor kit, no prices available on that. And ZTS Plastic did a Spitfire LF Mark 9E, a Reeboks KP Models kit for £17 to £20. Conclusions. The Frog Spitfire Mark 8 or 9 is 1974 tech and it shows, but this kit was on a par with the Matchbox Spitfire Mark 9 kit, with the exception of the poor canopy. The decals look okay and the plastic has no flash, as to be expected given the fact that the boxing is only 2 years old. The small Pilot and Frog standard of interior detail will allow this kit to be assembled fairly quickly. Interesting Royal Australian Air Force option though, and will be the version I will probably build. Kits to avoid are probably, I would say, the early tool Airfix Spitfire Mark 9, the Italeri kit, which is basically moulded out of the Mark 5 with a different forward engine bay and different wings, and also the Forces of Valor kit doesn't look too clever either. And also I've got in my stash the KP Models kit, or Cova Savoli Prostojove of an LF Mark 9E, and that doesn't look too bad, but again there's something, it looks decidedly wrong about the cockpit, so be aware of that if you have one of those in your stash as well. Anyway, I hope this video has been of some use. The video should be closing down quite quickly now, and if you have any queries or questions, just pop them in the comments and I'll get back to you with an answer as soon as possible. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you for the next one. Bye bye.